There we are. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and I'm your host, Briar Harvey. Today, I have the fabulous Faith Clarke for our discussion about work culture design. If you missed our first episode, we walked through what this looks like and what it entails. But that's not a prerequisite for hanging out with us today. So today we're covering the 5 culture design questions that you need to ask to what, Faith? To assess your actual cultural health within an organization?
Well, they're kind of like, hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be back, Briar, because I love this context for asking me questions. It gets me kind of pulling from myself. What's the thing? What actually is happening here? I love questions. Questions help me place myself within the access point of the solution. Like, where actually are we going to be working to solve the problem? Because honestly, every problem, we could solve it, we could try, we could approach it in one of 100 ways. And often the more complex the problem is, the more stuck we feel. It's like, okay, all right, so we're having a revolving door. Is this about the low pay that we're paying people? Yeah, probably. Is this about the conflict in the organization? Probably. Is there racial or marginalization? Yeah, maybe. It's like, where do we begin to solve the problem? So these are the 5 questions I ask myself, and I ask myself in a particular order because I tend to want to go first things first. And so this is my access point into how do we intervene when we feel like we have a culture design issue, or we just want to design a healthier culture.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably not ideal to assume that the culture is unhealthy. My bias is to assume that the culture is unhealthy. So,
And you know what? I agree with you. It's like, it's not about, for me, it's not about healthy or unhealthy, although there are unhealthy cultures. My question is just, is this the culture you want? Because there is a culture. Your organization, your business, your community, your team absolutely has a culture, right? And is it the culture you want? And is it the culture that's going to allow the people you want in your business to feel like they belong and that they can thrive, and therefore consistently, sustainably produce the high levels of productivity and performance that your business really craves?
so what is the framing here? You've been invited in, and we're getting ready to assess how the culture structurally is within this framework.
So it's whether I've been invited in or you're just the business leader, just the same way that you come up with a structure for offering what you offer to people in a way that is compelling to them. You could be asking yourself another set of questions so that you can structure the cultivation of the culture, so that when you invite people in, whether it's your bookkeeper or it's your first VA or you already have a team, it's the culture that actually makes the thing you're offering sustainably offered, right? There are like 2 main questions businesses have to be able to answer to live. And the first question is, am I offering something that the market wants? And you have to be able to answer that question sensibly. And you prove that by people actually buying from you. And then, am I able to sustainably produce that thing that I've already proven that the market wants? Well, sustainably produce that thing is about having the internal capacity. So when I talk about culture design, I'm talking about designing a space that naturally produces the productivity that you want in a way that honors humans. Because we've already done some design back in the day that did not honor humans. It was designed for a certain kind of productivity, but it was harming humans. And so when we say, hey, we want to actually like be ethical and we want to honor human beings, So then how do we do that? What kind of culture does that? Because we haven't really created this before in healthy ways at work, you know? So that's the question.
Well,
Answering that second question. And most organizations don't effectively answer that second question. They're constantly redesigning, constantly refiguring because, it's like, this doesn't sustainably help us produce what we need to produce.
so that's an interesting. So much of this is tied to scale, right? How big you are, how many people there are within the organization, and we really design things to grow exponentially, which is a problem. In the entrepreneurial community in particular, people will talk about not 2xing their revenue from last year as though
This
it's a
is awful.
fault.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't believe that you want to build something for mass reproduction yet. That's my personal belief, because when I look at a lot of these issues about how we human well together, we have to answer those questions in small clusters of people. I actually teach when I'm working with an organization. If it's a large organization, we want to find a group that this is actually manageable to teach in, and then a group with influence so that they can teach within small groups, because you cannot answer the question, what's sustainable culture design for 2,000 people? That's not a question that's a sensible question. We can answer what's sustainable cultural design for 6 people. So I'm like, what's the executive team? Let's figure that out. And then how does this trickle, or how does this cascade into the other spaces of influence? And do we give people the tools to be able to cascade a culture that's healthy, in multi? And I think this is more, that's why I use the word ecosystem, because this makes more sense within pockets of relationships and connections versus, how do we make this whole forest healthy? I'm like, not really. There's these bunch of interacting entities. What's happening here? And then how does that affect what's happening next door? And, keeping it moving. So, yeah.
Okay. So when we're looking at creating something, how do we clarify what we need?
Yeah. I think that's the first question. So, back up just to this example. Somebody asked me, they're designing a coaching program, and they wanted to know how to, they had bad experiences in other coaching programs, and they wanted to make sure they didn't reproduce the problems of the past, similar to the business problem, right? So I thought this was kind of cool. And so this person said, how do we make sure that the people in our program will, hit their goals within the next X number of years? And he was asking me a question that sounded to him like a strategy question, like these are the things we'll teach, and these are how often we'll have calls, and that kind of thing. And I said, that's not really the question. After this was over a couple of hours, I said, it's not really a question. This is a difference between traditional farming and a food forest. And he probably looked at me like, what kind of crazy are you saying? Because traditional farming is about that more mechanized, traditional scale farm. It's about that more mechanized. We're going to put carrots here. We're going to use this fertilizer. A food forest is an ecosystem that produces food. And I think that I invited this person to create a culture that the byproduct of it is these people's performance. Right? And so when I'm having this conversation about what are we doing, we have to say, what's the kind of space, what are the kind of activities, what are the kinds of feelings, what are the kinds of ways we would be together that would naturally produce the byproduct of peak performance while thriving? And I think that the only way that we can answer that question is by pulling all the people together, which is a thing that we didn't do back then, right? When we were designing for this other thing, we weren't really asking anybody anything. We were just like, we're going to use you until you burn out, and then we're going to substitute you for other people. The only way to figure out what's the environment that will bring everybody together and help them to thrive is to have everybody, or the representatives of everybody, answering this question, because we all know what helps us thrive. Like we all know what the barriers to our contribution is. Another question, another way to frame this question is, what are the barriers to our full contribution that we're experiencing, and how can we overcome those barriers collectively, right? What are the ways that our interactions together facilitate more, and what are the ways that it facilitates less? And that's the kind of first basic. If I'm talking about 5 questions, I lied, Briar. I'm going to share the presentation. How do I add it to the screen? um when I think about the 5 questions, it's not really 5 questions, it's like a million questions. But the first basic question, I'm going to show my pretty tree later. My son did this tree, but this first question about who we are, it's who do we want to be, and then contrasted with who we are. And then like it's a full on, having the ability to have a full on internal audit as to how our collective presence is being together. So who are we being? What are the thoughts and behaviors and feelings that we have together on repeat in our kind of working together? And when we can write this down or document it in some way, and then ask the other question, who do we want to be being, as in what's the kind of way that, if you were to not be so judgy of my black headphones, that would help me to feel more relaxed in your presence as we're co-working together. Those kinds of things, having that out then has us asking the questions, well, how do we create this bridge between who we are and who we want to be? So that's kind of like my first set of questions. And if I'm in a space where the problem isn't urgent, as in we're losing money now, we're not going to be able to pay the bills now, then this is where we start. Because if we don't have this clear, then who knows, it doesn't really matter what else we do. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that who we are is often overlooked.
I think especially because we don't recognize that we have a collective identity. Like us at this place where we work to do this thing, whatever it is that we're doing, we have a collective identity. We have a personality. We have a way that we are in the space. Because people leave the space and they're different. People come to the space and they act a certain way, and they leave and they go to another space and they act a different way. That's a reflection of the personality that we have right here in this space.
And we cultivate what that looks like, whether consciously or unconsciously. We really, I mean, I don't think are aware of how much I am, because I'm autistic. I know exactly how different people behave in one space versus another space, especially if I have the opportunity to observe them in
Yeah.
multiple spaces. But that seems to be an okay thing for most people, or that they don't mind transforming who they are from place to place to place. That bothers me deeply.
I think that we don't acknowledge how powerful the environment is at shaping how we show up, right? And so we will absolutely be different from space to space, because 80%, and this sometimes is so hard in our super individualistic type of way of being in this part of the world, but about 80% of how we show up is dependent on the environment we're in. And if you make it super basic, I mean, if for some reason right now the air quality in here changed, my behavior would change, my personality would change, my everything would change. And so when we own the fact that what we're actually needing to do is to cultivate environment, and then figure out what are the things that we're putting in this environment that's helping, and then what are the things that we're harming, then we'll start to see people being able to be their more optimal self, if you want to call it that, but just the self that feels more freeing to them. Because if you are in a space where the oxygen is the air quality is poor, then you must compensate by breathing shallowly, by protecting yourself. When we're in environmental spaces that are psychologically unsafe, we must compensate by self-protective mechanisms that we see all the time out in workplaces. So
And I think many of us do that unconsciously,
Right.
but we fix it by becoming aware, by naming the problem.
Yeah. 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 And when we can identify, like, this is who we actually are, and this is who we want to be, assuming that it is safe enough. We touched on that last time. Assuming that it is a safe place to do this, as in we honestly want to be this other thing. It's just that, we, before we could say we didn't want to be our parents, we were. Right. So we have taken on the environments that we were from, and we've brought it here, but we didn't mean to. It was unconscious, and now together consciously build our awareness of how that has become true, and then what we want to shift. That's what we need to be doing. This is a very hard thing to do when we don't have those agreements, in which case it becomes unsafe for people. Like, I can't be speaking up in a meeting where people haven't agreed to some of these ideals. I mean, I'll lose my job, and like rent and food, that's very important. And so, owning some of this has to mean making it safe for people, everybody, to participate in the culture design and in the culture building.
Okay, and how do we do that?
So first of all, I just wanted to, oh, where are my pictures? Which way are my pictures going? Oh, okay, here we go. I had such fun. Like, where are pictures? If I could create, if I wasn't asking my kids to do these pictures for me, because I have the in-house artists. So this was one that I had my son draw. I think that, I like visuals that help me, or I like images or frameworks that help me know what am I doing overall. I'm a big picture thinker, and then I translate that out into details. So when I think of an ecosystem, trees work for me. You can figure out what works for you. And I think that what we need to be doing is clarifying the core culture. That's what I have here in the middle that we were just talking about. And then building the capacity to live into this core culture. We do have these, my 5 questions have me interrogating different aspects of how people are living and working together to accomplish organizational goals. But I just want to kind of focus here on the fact that if we don't know who we want to be, and we don't have the muscles to be who we want to be, then the rest of it doesn't really matter. The rest of it is just, kind of putting a band-aid on a little bit of thing. Yes, increase salaries. Yes, check to see if your organization workforce is representative. But like, focusing in on the core issues will help some of the other things just go away more automatically. So I focus here on the what I call the upstream problems of knowing who you want to be, and then building the capacity to be that way. And so, if you want to put it in a sentence, or is it establishing that core, like knowing it, putting it out there as a specific thing, and then infusing the capacity in terms of the habitual practices that need to be built. So when I think about capacity building, and this leads into the meetings, which probably we'll talk about next time. When I think about capacity building, there is no ability to shift from who we are to who we want to be together without the ability to deeply listen, without the ability to know this is me and that is you, and we are different, and I don't have to judge your difference to allow that to be integrated into the space. And that's why I encourage this to happen on teams, because we have to own our judgments of difference. We have to own the fact that some people have voice, even in a team of 6 people. Some people have voice, some people don't, and there are varying reasons why that doesn't happen. And building the micro behaviors of pausing things. So much of this stuff is on autopilot. Pausing things to kind of like, hey, here's a moment where I think you are judging me. I think whatever it is that's happening, building those micro behaviors inside, they're more automatic, so that we can have the bigger, harder conversations. So this is a capacity building, and from team to team and within organizations, I would define it more specifically based on what's actually happening. But it really boils down to speaking and listening, being present with each other, and not judging difference. It's like, pretty fundamental, but hard to do.
Right. It's easy to say, hard
Absolutely.
to do.
And, Briar, the reality is that we're all byproducts of environments that either said, mask your difference so that so it doesn't show and you won't be judged for it, or force other people to become like you. Like these are the have been the two main behaviors. Become like, everybody looks this way, everybody acts this way. This is the way leaders should be. This is the way, well, this is what looks professional. So there is become this thing, or there is mask my difference. I'm talking about something that's not neither of those things. And because we are not used to doing that, that's why it takes the discomfort of practice among us. If I'm not masking, what am I doing? And that can be very difficult. I was in a conversation just today where people were talking about somebody else judging tattoos, and they were feeling uncomfortable with the conversation about tattoos because they were like, what if somebody here had tattoos under their clothes? And I was like, this is the, what should they do? That was a question that they were asking. I'm like, this is the very thing, substitute any topic. There is this thing of saying to people, don't talk about X. And then there's the other thing of hiding that I'm uncomfortable with X. And I'm like, there's something else. What is that thing? And I think that once we have the capacity, then we can deal with, oh, my picture's gone. How's my second picture just disappeared? Well, then we can deal with the elements of workflow. So this is just my kind of walking through what happens. Normally people join the organization, and I'm saying you have a whole bunch of processes associated with hiring this new person and getting them onboarded. And I think in that process, the most important thing that we can be doing is helping people feel well connected to the organization. Not just well connected in terms of tech and tools, not just well connected in terms of this is their chair and their desk, but who do they need to know so that it's easy for them to get their questions answered? What
Mm-hmm.
are the what's their way of navigating space, and how do we bring somebody alongside them that navigates similarly so that they can have a guide in navigating the space? What's the, like, what are the ways that the community makes space for this new person? It's not just this person saying, come show us that you're a good fit, but how does the community actually move aside and let this person take up the space they're meant to take up, which is different from the person who was in the role before them. So there's a bunch of activities that really invite the person to be deeply connected. So that would be the second question. How are we inviting people to be deeply connected with us? How are we creating space for people regardless of who they are? And then after they've been connected, like they've been plugged in, then how do we invite deeper engagement into our community? And that presupposes that you desire for your workspace to be a community. So what does this look like in the day-to-day, speaking in meetings, the workflow? How does a workflow actually invite this person to commune with us? Or are they having to force themselves into a spot that doesn't fit them, and so on? So how do we help people engage in the work community? That's the working together. That's not just, paint and sip, but it's the communing as we work. And then how do we help people feel like the new community has actually taken on some of the characteristics of this person? Because you know what happens when I join a community? I shouldn't just disappear into the community. The community actually changes to reflect aspects of who I am, right? The community that Briar joins is going to have more, better, individualized tech and tools. There's going to be an element of who Briar is that shows up in that community. And so when I think of cohesion, I think about how are we showing people that their voice matters? That's how are people being integrated into decision making? How are we modifying our safety, our psychological safety, our trust, and all this stuff to integrate the fact that Briar doesn't like meetings? There's a whole bunch of that person's voice
I
that's
truly don't.
oh, yeah, you don't. And how there's a bunch of this person's voice and this person's way in the world that needs to be infused into the communal way of being that actually changes the shape and color of everything. How is that actually happening? And so these are some of my questions that I ask. And then so if somebody came to me with an issue of equitable compensation, then I tend to think about cohesion if they're saying equitable compensation, because I'm saying, are we asking people what they need? how much do we understand? How much does the compensation plan currently reflect the humans who are actually on the ground? Before you run off and say, oh, we can give more gym, or we can give more childcare, or it's medical. I'm like, what are the kinds of conversations? How is the decision making happening, so that you're actually getting data not from Google, but from the humans who are sitting at the table? Are the humans at the table? That's where my brain goes when that kind of question comes in. Whereas if people are saying to me, people are leaving within 2 months of joining the organization, or we have a brain drain going on, I'm like, they didn't feel connected. That it's not happening there. So what are we doing that they don't feel disappointed? Invariably, people join an organization, feel motivated, and then they get disappointed because they realize, oh, the things you said you valued, you don't really value
Right.
within the first month or two. That's usually what's happening there. There's something that is either not true, or people aren't getting connected to the truth that they heard when they started. So those are kind of like my five areas when I think about. So when I think about meetings now, I am thinking, how are the times that we're actually together doing any of these things?
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing my pretty pictures.
And I'm going to put us back. Okay. So I really like the food forest is stuck in my brain,
Mm-hmm.
because permaculture design is very intentional.
Yep.
When you and I'm really just starting to dig into permaculture, but when you create something sustainable, the idea is that the environment is first, the
Mm-hmm.
production is second,
Mm-hmm.
and the production often outstrips traditional environments because it is compatible with the environment.
Yep. Yep.
So this is requiring us to think of the things in our businesses that create foundational security.
Yep.
When we are creating these things, how do we do that so that we are getting what we want a year from now, 5 years from now, right? The idea of permaculture isn't that we're building something today that's going to be there tomorrow and never change. That's not what we're doing. We're looking at the longevity of design.
Right.
So, what does that look like structurally in a workplace?
I really believe in building structures that are responsive, because what if there's anything that the past 3 years have told us, past 10 years have told us, is that the structure we build today absolutely will not be the structure that's needed even next year. So it really isn't about the structure, it's about the humans who are building the structure being responsive to what's going on internally, within them, interpersonally, and within the wider context. And what we haven't done, because again we're moving from these mechanized models, is built this level of responsiveness. What we've tried to do, and done a very bad job of it, is attached, oh, we need a new department of da, 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 plugged it on in here, made a monster business structure. What I'm advocating is a structure that has capacities within humans that then the The ruler that measures what needs to change is the person. I'm a qualitative researcher, if there's such a thing. And with qualitative research, one of the things that they tell us is the human is the instrument. No, it's not the assessment form that's the instrument. No, it's not the quiz that's the instrument. The human is the instrument. I think the human instruments we need to tune ourselves to read, number one, our internal world, so that we're cultivating our internal environment. Two, between two humans, what's the environment that we're creating right here between us for this interaction that we have once every 2 weeks? What's the thing I'm cultivating? Being intentional about that, so that if a third person is added, the scaling is easy, because what I'm scaling is my capacity to cultivate environment, to notice, oh, Briar is different when a third person is added. And what does that mean in terms of how we flex to include this third person in our culture building? When we build that ability to be responsive, then we automatically will shift according to the environment outside as well as the internal environment. And that's why I'm back to, our analogy last time. Who's at the party? Like, just the ability to notice. Some people at the party that aren't dancing. I don't know why they aren't dancing. I've made up stories about them. Like, all of that noticing is in the capacity building, because the party structure is going to change. What's called a party is going to change. The venue for the party is going to change. What's going to be music or not. Like, everything's going to change. But our ability to notice our own interactions and response to it, that's what's going to be the goal.
This is, it does. And I can tell you why this is hard, because there are too many variables for me to predict an outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't like that. I mean, and I don't like that. Neurotypicals don't like that. Like,
no one likes
no one likes that.
But you know why we don't like it? We don't like it because we've been trained to honor certainty and work towards certainty. I don't think our ancestors had the luxury we had of wanting certainty. I actually think that we have the ability to be in wildly chaotic environments and dance with the chaos. I think we forced a certain kind of certainty on, and that certainty was only for the privileged, because it was wildly chaotic for the people who are stolen and for people who are being taken advantage of anyway. But we've honored that certainty as a thing that's here on the hierarchy. But I think that if we strip it back to what we understand in our bodies, and if we tune ourselves to, wow, I do have wisdom that allows me to know things. So the certainty is to protect us from the disaster. And actually, I have enough. And this is what I have to work on with my kids, because, with the neurovariances, then anxiety is a big deal. And so the thing we're constantly reinforcing is our own ability in the future moment that we don't know anything about to be fine, because we have built the capacity to respond to chaos.
So let's talk about that. How do you build a capacity to respond to chaos?
If it's chaos between humans, then it's either assuming that it's not danger. And I think that that's the first thing. We have at home, we have a bunch of measures as to what's danger and what's not danger. And I think in the business, we have that too. That has to be part of how we design our culture, to know what's in the case of danger, all hands on deck, whatever we've decided the culture is going to be. If you have a hotel business and there's customer first, we're going to go in, everybody's going in the kitchen, we're going to come back out and want to put on a big show. And outside of danger, then there has to be, well, when something feels chaotic, first of all, asking questions about it. It's like, okay, pause here. This kind of feels different from what I thought it would feel. What's happening there? Because the fact that it feels chaotic to me doesn't mean it feels chaotic to you. So then the ability back to our individual, like, what's going on for me? Is that the same thing that's going on for you? Are we making an assumption? What are the accommodations that are needed? This whole business about accommodations and supports is not just, not just text on the bottom of the screen, but it is where am I supposed to be yielding here so that this feels less chaotic for you? Like it's all of those things that's a dance with chaos. And if we know that we have the abilities to yield without being broken, because the environment is safe enough, like I can say, actually, Brian, that's a little bit too much for me. Give me a few minutes. I'll be right back. And I'm not going to lose my job, and you are not going to lose respect for me, and all the things. Then that builds my ability to handle the chaos that's here. So I start off with the assumption that we know how to be with chaos. And if you've been a parent, you doubly know how to be with chaos. So can we translate those skills back into the workplace by making it safe to apply them in the workplace?
And we're going to come back to this over and over, I'm sure of it. That safety to apply those skills is key.
Yep. Yep. And the sad thing is that it's not been safe. And that's why we don't apply it.
That's
Right.
correct.
And also, when they tell us that it's safe and we believe them and then we get slapped, it's even worse, doubly not safe. You're like, wait, what? So I can't believe what you say either, right? So as back to the long game, that as business owners, so if we're talking to business owners, we have to know that we're cultivating something that has not existed, that people who've been traumatized by previous experiences are coming in that don't believe us. So we're going to have to prove ourselves to be trustworthy. And we have to allow ourselves to make mistakes because we don't know either. We were bringing in the old stuff from the old systems too. And then we're going to have to forgive each other and actually be human together. We're going to have to forgive each other and allow each other to make mistakes as we co create the culture together. The moment it switches to, I'm the leader and I'm creating a culture for you, we're reproducing what those people did. You can't create a culture for me. We create culture together. Not anything for me without me. That's no, right? So,
And when we force it, we don't get the results that we're looking for. I mean, our current modern culture really indicates that
yeah,
because there are so many factions who are attempting to force behavior,
yeah,
and the response isn't, well, of course I'll comply. The
yeah,
response is, fuck you and your compliance. I'm going to go do this thing over here.
yeah.
So, what does it look like to build collaboration?
I think, and that's again why I start with the small group, right? Because yeah, nationwide, it's madness. It's madness. And we've forgotten, just yesterday, I was talking to the kids about, we've forgotten that we understand people in our focus to have people do the thing we want them to do, say the thing we want them to say. We've forgotten that we actually understand what most people mean. And like you say whatever it is you said. And then I'm like, that's not the thing you should have said. You should have said this thing. You didn't use that word. You use this word. And we've forgotten that we have the ability to understand what people mean. And so I think we can practice the reciprocal. I understand what you mean. Could you say this way instead? Between two people, between five people, between eight people, and build that there, because it's very hard. Collaboration does not happen at scale unless it's rippling out. And I think we've tried to mandating collaboration at scale is dictatorship. That's
It is.
so that's not, and it's always sad to just see, oh, what we're doing for our healing is reproducing the thing that was done to us by doing it to other people. So I'm mandating you act this way because somebody else mandated something that was harmful to me. I do think it has to be, I hear you, you hear me. What's the both and? What's the, and we don't know how to stop playing the zero sum game. So we have to be willing to be in that question in a way that's like, be in the dissonance. Like, I don't know, but I am committed to figuring this out with you in a way that doesn't harm you and doesn't harm me. I think it has to start there. And we don't know how to do that for more than six people at a time, I think. So
If you've not yet read Simon Sinek's Infinite Game, I
Mm-hmm.
encourage you especially, but listeners too. The idea that we're playing to win is, I think, fundamentally part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like to play a game where there are no losers because there are no winners?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a fundamentally different argument.
Yeah, yeah.
It's how do we grow together?
Yeah, yeah. It was fun. I saw, I don't know if this is true, but I had heard that the person who played the game, who created the game Monopoly, also created another version that was kind of egalitarian and everybody won. And they decided that the one that would be marketed for money was Monopoly. That was better. But I do think that we don't
That
know.
game has a very long storied history. Yes, that's a part of
That's a
it.
point. I'm sure that that's a rabbit hole that you enjoyed. I don't know if you,
Yes, it's true. I could tell you that's a whole nother
you
episode.
could, we
The
could do
game
that.
of Monopoly. Holy shit.
But I think that this whole thing about everyone thriving and it's a yes, yes, that's a thing that we have to be like, whoa, I don't know how to do that. And then what does that mean? And so, you and I know that, okay, figuring that out in a family, what does that mean? Well, that's a lifetime's worth of work. But perhaps if I persist with it, what I'm doing is infusing the muscles in my children to even ask the hard questions and to stay in the asking of the hard questions. Because what I found in the workplace for sure is that everything is so reductive. We want answers so quickly that we don't stay with the question long enough to even begin to get to what's really happening there.
No, everyone is in an existential hurry.
It was like, because we all feel that, it's not just win. It's like the lions, the tigers, and the bears. Like if we stop long enough to probe this question, some terrible thing is going to happen and we're all going to die. And even if we can't articulate it, that's how our whole systems are acting. It's like, no, actually, there is such value in staying in this moment and asking the question and building the muscles to ask the question and be in the discomfort.
So I think that's the next question. How do we assess the difference between discomfort and danger?
Mm-hmm. I think we are in the workplace. This is about we'll have to keep going back to this whole thing of defining the culture, right? Because we're going to be in a moment like you were with your toddler and they pick up a knife and you're like, it was a fun play moment. Everything was cool. You were fine. And then it became danger. And so then you learn something like, then this kid's getting excited this way, we need to move the excitement from the kitchen to the right. I think we have the ability to be in danger and solve dangerous problems and then step back and learn from them. Often we're not doing, by far, which goes back to my thing about meetings, we're by far doing not enough reflection on whatever has happened in meetings to even know like what went on here, what caused what went on, what happened the moment before that I see. So up to this point it was that, and then this and this and that I see. So maybe how could we in the future without rushing, because if we can do that we will get clearer on this is actual danger, not just the thing my lizard brain made up. This is the actual danger. And then how do I want to be in that danger? Who's equipped to be in that danger? All the stuff in our job descriptions are made up. And then we have the actual moment and we see what happens. And then we're like, okay, so in this moment, this is who needs to respond. A great team to model, not necessarily because of their, equitable and how they treat humans, but a great type of team to model is emergency room teams. Because everybody has a job, but then there's the actual danger that shows up. And then there's this reflection. There's the actual danger, and then there's what needs to be done. And the actual danger can become massive and they can curtail it. So when you see everybody just jump together and people are they're almost reading each other's minds. They just fall into sync. They're going to be with the danger. They want to step back out. And then we reflect on this, we figure out we should have done differently. I think that though first responders similarly, you figure out, we know what to do with danger. We need to be reflecting on that boundary between serious and dangerous, and then what we need to do with it.
Ironically, the one kind of meeting that I do like is a postmortem.
Mm,
And we have very few of those in business situations. But in medicine, postmortems are done as a part of that's part of the job.
yeah.
And depending on the institution, many of them just have a scheduled meeting once a week where they go through, these are the cases, this is what happened, what could we do differently?
Yep. Yep. There is I read a study I was so fascinated by. The hospital again, two wards. Whatever the problem was, it was too, like, people were spending too much time. They came in and it was like 5 hours later, like the emergency rooms we've been in. And they created an intervention plan. And one ward was successful and one wasn't. And the difference was just the daily debrief. In the first one, at the end of every day, they sat down and they said, okay, we tried the plan. This was a problem. The printer was in the wrong place. It was, okay, who can move the print? And they brainstormed both the success and the obstacles every single day. The second one, they said, this thing was taking too long. We're not doing this. So, of course, they abandoned the intervention by the third day and they were back to whatever the problem was. And it was like, there was a constant reminder of why we're doing it, connection to big picture, and a constant invitation into this vision that they want to create. And then all hands on deck to remove obstacles and refine the plan every single day. And I was like, yes, that is what it takes.
That is what it takes. And I think that, I mean, we'll keep coming back to this, but the reflection and review portion of the process is the thing that gets skipped most often and is absolutely the most essential. If we're not saying this is what happened, this is what it looked like, and this is how we could have done better, then we're not getting the answers that we need. And again, this comes from a culture of safety,
Yeah.
because I can't say this is what I could have done better if I am going to be criticized for not having done it right in the first place.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not going to say this is what I could have done better if I don't have space to even reflect on that. If the moment I finish
Mhm.
doing the thing, I'm off to the next thing and I'm off to the next thing. And reflection has to be, I have to catch you after work. Like, which after work? I have to go cook for my kids. And, if we aren't making space in the workflow for the debrief and making it safe for the debrief to actually be an effective debrief, we want to call it that. But it's not just the big events that must be debriefed, because when we're doing a culture design or redesign, then anything that's not automatic, anything that's not the way we do things here. So if we have some time when we're meeting just to listen to everybody talk about their status report, then we should be debriefing the exercise of listening. How was that? Who found that they were drifting off and they had to check social media? What's making this hard and how do we build this skill better? That must be debriefed.
And again, curiosity, willingness to accept those answers, a willingness to be able to sit with the discomfort. So I want to come back to that one more time. When we're in a place of discomfort,
Mhm.
how do we determine that that's not danger?
In your body, you mean, when I'm feeling I mean, I don't know how other people determine it, but I have some things that I've marked off as lions, tigers, and bears. Crashing the car. I think that our list of things that feel like danger is massively long. Your account in being in overdraft feels like danger. Getting a ticket feels like danger. Your boss shouting at you feels like danger. And I have to separate the fact that I'm having a response. Police sirens have come up and I'm having a response and I'm not in danger. And building in our ability to actually say, hey, I'm having a fear response because of historical stuff. and old deals, but I'm actually not in danger right now, is the very, very first thing. What are some of the things that I respond to like it's danger, but it's not? And so, because I've had a lot of it's become very important to me in my home to make those assessments. Like, are the doors actually locked? Because I imagine very dangerous things happening all the time. I think similarly at work, you asking yourself honestly, what's the actual danger? Because we could speculate out anything. But what's the actual danger? Or is this just something that feels uncomfortable to me? And again, as a leader, because we have to know that it's on the person who is inviting people to join this work mission. That's what I'm calling the job that we're doing. It's on that person to be for themselves both assessing danger and modeling that assessment of danger. Just like it is for parents in the house, that when a child looks at you and you kind of look relaxed, then they kind of relax. Often, as leaders, we're acting like every minute the company is going to fall into the toilet. Every second, the everything matters 100%. You have not sent this email in on time. Like and we are the one part of the ones that are ramping up the sense of everything matters 100%. And so, Marissa is really good at this. Marissa Lowen, just kind of like, no, it's okay. No, that's okay
It's
too.
fine.
It is okay because it's really nothing's what everybody. You food, and knowing what actual danger is now. What are the real lions and tigers and bears? That's the thing that we have to be retraining ourselves with.
And I think what's key is that we are doing that constantly. It
Yep.
too is a reassessment and post-mortem process.
Yep.
What is actual danger at this time in my life?
Right.
Because if I am not regularly redefining that, then I will see danger where none exists.
Yep. Yep. The tools that we're talking about, those capacity building tools for a collective, it's the same set of tools for every individual. Because I have to know you're having a conversation with me, I'm responding like you're being disrespectful to me, and I have feelings about that, and that all that's going on. I need my ability to say what's happening for me. It's like I didn't, and it could be, like we talked about, I didn't eat this morning. My son was up all night. I'm actually physically depleted and prone to hearing when it's not really happening. And our own individual abilities and teams, it has to be, I build my individual ability to assess me and how I'm responding to environment, and then how that affects how I'm interpreting you, and then my ability to ask some questions, knowing that there's a bunch of noise in the environment, including what I watched on news this morning and whether the school bus showed up for my kid, just so that I can hear you and respond to you well. Yep.
Let's wrap this up in a little bow.
Yeah.
These are the 5 questions you're asking.
Mhm.
Go over them one more time.
Who are we and who do we want to be? That's our core culture. Do we have the skills? And that's a yes or no question, but it's really a no. Do we have the skills to implement the culture we want, right? And what are these skills for us as a team? Then, how are we inviting people to connect with us as a community? How are we helping them engage with us as a community? And then, how are we helping their voice to actually matter so it changes the color of who we are as a community? And once we are practiced in the nuanced ways of asking those questions and getting the answers, then those answers are not, they're not, like an incantation. They magic the solution. Once we have some answers, then we're going to have to practice. Like, oh, you need to do core workout? Yeah, 50 push-ups or 50 sit-ups every day. So there are now things that we should be doing in every meeting, in every interaction, to be creating the culture we want in each of those areas.
Yeah, and I think that's what's key. These questions are very big, but the answers themselves are very concrete.
Yeah.
There is clear, defined meaning behind the answers to these questions. And if you ask them right, you will get a list of things that you can check some boxes off of.
Yeah. And the list will be, there'll be verbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things that we need to be doing, present
Mm-hmm.
continuous. And so we may need to learn how to be doing them. We need to create space to be doing them. We need to create environments where the doing is not judged, but we need to be doing these things to actually
Mm-hmm.
make the change. Yeah.
Yeah. I adore you.
Always fun.
So next time, are we talking about meetings, or do we have to
Yeah.
go someplace else before we get to meetings?
Well, you know what? My brain might take us somewhere else, but no, I think we're going to talk about meetings.
Theoretically, 2 weeks from now, we'll
We'll
be
talk
here
about
to
meetings.
talk about meetings. It's
The
great.
meetings are the when, right? This is
Mhm,
all we talked about is the what. And once we
mhm,
get the what clear, and we get the what clear in the meetings too. But then it's like, when are we actually building this capacity? When are we
mhm.
actually helping people engage? When are we connecting? When are we, right? It's happening in meetings.
And if we're not defining that clearly, then it's happening without our conscious awareness, and
Yeah.
that is not culture we're creating. That's culture that happens to us.
That's what's happening to you. Yep.
Hmm.
That's not, yeah, it's happening, but it's the person not feeling connected, and that's culture too.
Hmm.
Right? Yeah.
Y'all, this is absolutely like the tent post of what we are building here at the Neurodiversity Media Network. The ability to come and have these conversations with depth and with nuance. And that's where I'm at, y'all. There is so little nuance in the world right now, and we need to be able to come together to hear each other and to hear what we have to say, to be able to take this discussion farther and out into the world. And we're not going to do it by not listening. So, if you would like to support this work, please go to the neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. Paid subscriptions are start at $25 a month. It's $300 a year, and we cannot do this work without you. We greatly appreciate your time today. Faith, as always, you are a joy and a delight. And we will be back in 2 weeks for, theoretically, meetings.
Yes, meetings. Thank you, Briar. It's always a pleasure.
We will see you again soon, y'all. Bye now. Oh, I'm slow on